Okay, we've got a really awesome topic today, so I really don't want to wait too long. If you are on here already with us, you heard the recording start, you may just have to click a dialog box on your computer saying you agree to that to be able to interact with the Zoom, I believe chat or unmuting or any of that. So please make sure that you click that dialog box so that if needed, you aren't held up later in the webinar. But we are going to go ahead and get started, and I just want to say thank you all for joining us for our March Enhance webinar. As always, I am Amanda Borkowski, and I am the Dairy Girl Network staff lead for our Enhance webinar. Today, we are joined by Amy DePlatt Church for the webinar titled Gen Z, Changing the Face of Food. We're really excited that you are here to join us in this conversation, and we really do encourage you to use that chat feature to ask questions or leave comments all throughout the webinar. And you're also welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions during or at the end as well. And as always, we really do love being able to actually see you in these webinars, and our speakers always appreciate it too. So if you are able and comfortable, I would welcome you to turn your video on. Doesn't matter, again, as always, if you're in the barn or in the office and you can, we'd love to see you. And finally, I do want to give a special thank you to our March webinar sponsor, Look East, as well as a special thank you to Zoetis for providing the web hosting and recording for all of our Enhance webinars. And I do want to say, if you are joining us and you are not asking a question, definitely stay on mute just so we can make sure to avoid any background noise unintentionally. I do have just a couple of Dairy Girl Network announcements before we get going today. And the first one is that we do have an in-person Connect networking event next week on Wednesday, March 20th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. during the Central Plains Dairy Expo in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Laura Daniels, our president and founder, will be presenting on burnout and practical strategies to help combat it. And DGN staff Brittany, who's with us today, will also be there and be a part of that event. Your registration will include lunch, beverages, a Dairy Girl Network t-shirt, along with other swag from our sponsors just for signing up. Our registration is open, and I definitely want to make sure that you save your seats and head over to dairygirlnetwork.com to register today. If you need more info, you should be able to check previous emails or our social media as well. We also hope that you are saving the date for our next Forward Together National Conference that is happening November 5th through the 7th of this year in Kansas City. This event brings together dairy women, both producers and industry members, to learn, grow, and recharge their batteries. Our conferences focus on personal and professional development to help you learn, lead, and succeed in your daily dairy woman journey on the farm, at home, and throughout our industry. So make sure you're marking it on your calendars to join us in November, and look for registration to open sometime in May. And finally, just a reminder to sign up for Dairy Girl Network membership. Our membership is free thanks to our generous sponsors. And whether you work with cows, work to support people with cows, have a history in the industry, or just a passion for dairy, there is a seat for you at the DGN table. Our membership is fast, free, and easy, and sign up takes less than 5 minutes. So join 3,000 plus dairy women from around the country and sign up today at dairygirlnetwork.com under the Join tab. And then you'll get all those fun announcements like those Connect events and the conference straight to your email, so you don't have to worry about searching that information out. And now I am absolutely pleased to introduce today's speaker. So Amy DePlatt Church is passionate about understanding consumers and earning their trust, helping farmers maintain their freedom to operate and utilize technology and modern production practices. Since 2015, she has worked at Look East, advising farm groups, agribusinesses, and food companies to create and implement programs on sustainability, animal welfare, and technology acceptance. She actively volunteers with educational, ag, advocacy, and dairy organizations such as Dairy Girl Network. Living in Northeast Wisconsin for the past 25 years, Amy grew up on an Iowa dairy farm and graduated from Iowa State in dairy science and ag journalism. And again, please use that chat to ask questions or unmute yourself. And with that, Amy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Amanda. And it's great to see some familiar names and faces around the audience today. So I would hopefully, I'd love if you would just put in the chat kind of where you're joining us from and what's your organization or your role in the dairy network, just to get a sense for what our interests are. But I definitely see a variety here of folks joining in from farms or from industry or processors. So just really great to see you here today. And before I get started, really, my hope is that we have an interactive conversation. So I welcome any questions at any time. Just jump right in. And probably as we're having that conversation, I have prepared slides here, a lot of statistics, but we might fast forward through some of those and make sure we're really talking about the points that matter to each of you. So I'm going to take a quick look at, we're seeing hellos from outside of DC, Illinois, Minnesota, Dakotas, California, Ohio, Plymouth, Wisconsin. Excellent. Indiana. So great to hear from all of you, and keep using that chat, please, or just unmute yourself as well, as Amanda said. So first of all, happy to be here today. I have a long background with Dairy Girl Network, and congrats on the 10th anniversary. That's been fascinating to watch. I'm really excited about the national conference in Kansas City. I'm actually joining in from Kansas City today. So Look East, which is the organization that I work for, is based in Kansas City. And just a bit of explanation. And first, let's do a sound check. Is my sound coming through okay? Yeah, good deal. So Look East, we're proud to sponsor today and bring this information. We work with several organizations, literally from farm to fork. And one of those organizations is the Center for Food Integrity. And so you'll see some interchangeability between Look East and the Center for Food Integrity. But this new research and the insights and recommendations we're going to talk about today, specific to Gen Z, is based on some work done by the Center for Food Integrity. And really, all of this conversation is centered around trust and public trust. So we know that really the pinnacle, or sometimes the bottleneck if we have a lack of trust, but that pinnacle for social license or farmers' freedom to operate is really all dependent on trust. And in fact, kind of across businesses, smart folks would say that trust is an organization's most valuable yet intangible asset. And there's a lot of work being done to try to measure and articulate the reputation of businesses and organizations and sectors, industries like dairy, and then understand how to improve that reputation or that trust in the public or the consumer's eyes. And that's really what the Center for Food Integrity has been doing all along since it was formed about 15 years ago. And that mission has stayed the same over those 15 years, helping today's food system build trust. And we talk a lot about food because I think in our everyday lives, as farm kids and farm supporters, we talk about farming and agriculture, but making that clear connection that really what we do is all about food as well as fuel and some other consumables. But so our mission is helping today's consumer and public have trust and confidence in the farming and food production sectors. So here's just a quick snapshot of the members of CFI, simply to demonstrate the diversity that's really important to us. So ranging from some production companies, you'll see some in the ag supply chain, like on the farm credit side, or Corteva and Cargill bringing inputs, and then all the way to very popular global consumer brands, and names and logos there like Starbucks, Costco, Chick-fil-A. We're also really pleased to work with credentialed experts, especially those from research institutes. We work with several land-grant universities. And also we appreciate engaging with what I call are the reasonable NGOs. So World Wildlife is a great example of an NGO who really wants to help to make improvement in the environmental area. And they see farming and food production solutions to make improvements for our environment. So that's a cross section of the groups that are members of CFI, the Center for Food Integrity. So let's kind of zoom in here and talk a bit about Gen Z. And, there's been really a lot of conversation about that. And that's because that's the up and coming generation, especially when we look in terms of their purchasing power. So, and I've got to tell you, I feel like I can relate more to Gen Z, perhaps, than when we were having this same conversation, 10 years ago around the millennials as they came into their own. But for Gen Z, for me personally, I'm a mother of 2 college students, 21 and 19. So as I look at this, I'm like, whoa, I really see that, kind of in our home and family life and with the friends of my kids. But defining Gen Z, they were born between 1997 and 2012. So right now that puts them in that 12 to 27 age range. That would be about 1/5 of the US population, but globally about 1/3. So that's really been, in several high population countries, a lot of youth coming into their own. So as I just mentioned, a fast growing economic power. And as they're taking jobs and even part-time jobs, as high schoolers, but as they're taking jobs and moving into full-time jobs, a full-time workforce, they have a strong belief that they can influence change through the purchases of brands that they support. So there's that combination of a large demographic, a large economic power, and this really socially motivated attitude that we're going to talk about. There's a lot of diversity in this younger generation. Some trends that we're seeing, they are more likely to complete high school, also more likely to enroll in college compared to some of the generation just ahead of them. And a very, very consistent finding in many different studies is that Gen Z really supports technology, and technology, how it solves problems. And this, in my mind, combined with this drive for social causes, this is really a great opportunity for us. They're like love of, and it's really a need for an appreciation for technology. That's a huge opportunity. But just think about it, like Gen Z, like my college kids, they have not known life really without a device in their hands, and so the vast majority of them own a smartphone. They wouldn't even know what a flip phone is, which was kind of like my generation, we started on that, right? But they've just had a smartphone in their hands. So some of the stats about how they're using that, messaging apps 3 hours or more a day. Half of the Gen Z adults report that half of the Gen Z adults are using social media 3 or more hours a day. Significant portion is gaming, and they're usually doing these things all at once because they're just kind of all over from app to app, like going so quickly and like mentally and physically multitasking. They tend to really gravitate toward stories. They just want to kind of crave that whole story behind the headline. They have an appetite for longer videos, how-tos, vlogs. So sometimes we think of a shorter attention span as folks use more digital, but that's proving to be different with Gen Z, where they really, if it's a topic of interest, they're going to zoom in, dive in, and really work to understand it and know the full story. They, as I mentioned, appreciate technology, and they support innovation that improves food and beverages, or innovation that's going to make improvements for the environment. So an example of that, one area I've done quite a bit of work in personally is with the new technology of gene editing. So it's a different form of genetic improvement. It's not GMO, it's not transgenic, but it's a different form of genetic improvement where we can make simple, very specific changes in an organism, and it can help animals to be resistant to disease, plants resistant to disease, more tolerant of drought conditions, you know, and there are several like nutrition and quality improvements, like fruit that will last longer and are less likely to brown. So lots, I mean, gene editing, it's just amazing. So when we've done research around consumer acceptance of this genetic improvement, Gen Z is the most accepting. As long as they see that the technology is being used to solve a problem that resonates with them, a cause that they support, like the environment, like improved care for animals, or like better quality food produced in a more sustainable way. So we said we wanted for this to be interactive. So I'd invite you to either unmute and answer this question or type in the chat. But just in this quick overview, thinking of the Gen Zers that you know, does this sound consistent with what you've seen? Seeing a yes, couple yeses. Very consistent. Yeah, so I always think it helps to have a person or two in mind as we talk about consumer insights. Yeah. So a bit more about how Gen Z are using social media. So the latest statistics would show that at least one time per day, 3/4 of Gen Zers are using YouTube. About 60% are on TikTok and Instagram at least one time per day, 48% on Snapchat, 43% on Facebook, which that number surprises me a bit because I tend to think of Facebook as resonating with my generation and older, but Gen Z is still showing up and using Facebook, and then a smaller percentage on X or Twitter. And you know, there's so many different ones coming out. You know, Be Real, I think it's been one of the more recent. But it's interesting to see what are the channels that are predominantly being used. A few other notables about this most recent research that came from IFIC, which is the a food-based group in DC. 79% say of Gen Zers say they will purchase based on influencers, the recommendations of influencers that they trust and watch and view. More than half are finding food inspiration on TikTok, and 35% do grocery shopping online, at least on a weekly basis. So a couple questions in response to that. How many of you or your organization are actively on these platforms today? So YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. How are you feeling about your personal or your company's use of these platforms? See, Amanda's reporting she tries a new recipe from TikTok once a week. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. See, DFA Insta and Facebook for sure. Yeah. Facebook and Instagram seem pretty consistent. Some use of Snapchat also. And some of this, especially for organizations and for brands, this question and the right answer is really dependent with the target audience for your service or products. But one thing I've really appreciated that dairy and I think the dairy checkoff organizations are really working hard and early to be on several of these important platforms. Kind of a follow-up question. How would you describe, are you seeing that Gen Z employees within your organizations or on your farm, are these Gen Z employees having an opportunity to share their story, share the dairy farming story through these platforms? Like, how would you self-reflect and rate that? I'm seeing less chat right now, but we'll come back and check that. Okay. Or Gen Z employees do have this opportunity. And Jennifer, remind me where you're checking from.
I'm in California, San Luis
Okay.
Obispo. So we have a lot of recent Cal Poly graduates. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. So just a little foreshadowing with that question. And so that's kind of where we're going to go next with this. Now that we have a sense of the profile of Gen Z, kind of what do we do with that? I want to poke back in the chat here. So Mary reporting a lot of farmers on Facebook and DFAs trying to help them to promote their stories. Unsure if they are Gen Z or not. So sure, fair there. And that farmer story, we know just as groundwork, that farmer story, it continues to be so important. Any of the consumer research that I've recently seen is farmers continue to be such a trusted voice, the most trusted voice in terms of what they're doing specifically on the farm. And that trust is also given by Gen Z. So a bit about Gen Z's eating habits. A distinction with this generation is they are really seeing food as more important than basic sustenance. It's more important than that basic nourishment. So food that's important not only for the body, but also for mental wellness. And their food choices have a direct connection with the social impact and the positive social impact that they're trying to have. So they see the connection of their food choices and how those choices affect the planet, the people who are working to produce that food, like people in the meat plants or people that are harvesting produce in the fields. And that greater purpose that organizations and industry sectors have. So the food that they're purchasing or consuming needs to do a lot of things. It needs to check a lot of boxes for Gen Z. So more specifically for the body, they're looking for smart indulgences. So snacks and desserts kind of fit right into their healthier lifestyle, but they're prioritizing vitamins. I hear quite a bit about protein and also kind of practicing portion control so that they can maintain that health and also have some indulgences with those desserts and snacks. Really a balanced nutrition. So looking at that wide variety of foods. And when they incorporate plant-based, it's perhaps more in a way of like flexitarian, some plant-based protein along with animal proteins, instead of a real strict like vegetarian or a strict keto or a strict other kind of nutrition program. and clean eating, and kind of the fewer processed ingredients on the label, the better. And they want to moderate their intakes of sugar, salt, unhealthy fats. So clean eating, balanced nutrition, smart indulgences, portion control. For the mind, this one isn't intriguing for me, but how our food choices support our mental health as well. So just having a relationship with food, a more healthy relationship with food, mindful eating, kind of trusting your body and understanding how your body responds after eating different foods, and really kind of asking that question, if I don't feel well after consuming some specific ingredients, could that be because of intolerances, right? And so including food that is free of stress and guilt. So Gen Z is the only generation that puts mental health in the top 3 benefits that are coming from food, beverage, and nutrients. It's a very distinguishable point. I do see a question here in the chat, so I want to address that. I feel like everyone is doing this today, and how is this different from the general population? So I think, Mary, that's a real fair question, but this is all kind of based on different research and statistics from across generations, and there's a higher percentage of Gen Z than reported from other generations. Generally, what I see in any study that's looking at differences by generation is that as we get older, we're a bit more set in our ways, right? And we're kind of moving more toward the habits that we've had for several years. But Gen Z is just starting that and starting their curiosity and setting their choices. So there's generally more curiosity and more openness. Brittany, I think that's a great observation. Yeah, that if you're not seeing the chat, Brittany says, I think we, the older generation, are trying to fix bad habits and have that diet culture, and Gen Z is trying to not start them. It's really well said. Thank you, Brittany. And then in this last, I want to spend more time talking about Gen Z's desire. It's beyond desire, really. It's a need for their food and beverage choices to feel good that those choices are also good choices for the planet, for people, and that fit that social purpose, those causes that are so important to Gen Z. So among Gen Z, 75% agree that the world is really at a tipping point in terms of Earth and our natural resources. 68% say that they've been impacted by severe weather. 32%, or nearly a third of Gen Z, says climate change has a major impact on their food and beverage choices. So in comparison, among all adults, 22% of all adults would say climate change impacts their purchase choice. For baby boomers, that's less, 17%. So Gen Z is definitely looking at what's the impact of this specific food or beverage that I'm considering. What's the impact on the environment, on climate change? And then that's weighing into whether or not they will purchase or consume. Concern about food waste, wasting money. Also yet a high concern, not only about myself, but for those others around me and those in need. So when Gen Z sees some of the different programs that retailers or restaurants or others where they're getting unused food to food pantries, to charities, organizations, people in need, Gen Z is incredibly supportive of that, and that increases their loyalty to those brands that are doing that. So simply said, Gen Z feels like if they can reduce their personal carbon footprint, then they're doing their part to help preserve and improve the environment. Some ways they might do that is minimizing their consumption of meat, and buying local to minimize those food transport miles. I'm going to take another quick look in the chat here. Graham says, I still see a lot of people eating unhealthy foods in rural South Dakota. Graham, I'm normally in rural Wisconsin, and I see that to be true as well. So what we're showing here are some kind of national perspectives. Mary, a question, what does buying local mean? It's a relative term, and I would completely agree with that, Mary. I think in these are summations of many different studies that have been done. Some of those studies might define buying local, but I can't speak to that without like pointing to one exact study. I think generally buying local probably means, within 50 to 100 miles, that feels like a reasonable drive, to get food from Green Bay to Shawano, for example, or, definitely local is within my state. So a bit more as we zoom in on Gen Z and their perceptions around food. That what they're eating is really tied to identity. And one big way we see that show up is how many postings of food, like, here's the meal I just ordered and I'm about to enjoy, or here's the recipe that I found on TikTok and made, and here's the picture of my result that I'm posting on Insta or back on TikTok or Snapchat. And so by being so apparent with my food choices, then that's an extension of my identity. So 68% of Gen Z, says that resonates, that's what a behavior, where for baby boomers, that's only 43%. Gen Z support innovation that improves food and beverages. We talked about that a bit with the gene editing example that I gave, but some of those other examples, really there's quite a few food tech examples. Gen Z generally craves experiences and they want transparency and authenticity. And this is simply true in every aspect of their life. So that influences their relationship with and their visibility around food. So one specific example we'll talk about in a bit are experiences like being on a farm tour and just doing the thing. I don't want to just see it. I want to participate. I want to do it. I want to be active, and then I want to show that activity and tell others about it. So mentioning one of the tours, so something that's been increasingly important by brands and industry groups, like groups of dairy farmers, are to identify who are the online influencers that are really having the most impact on my target consumer audience, because consumers will report that once I've found a YouTuber, a vlogger, a blogger that really I resonate with and resonates with me, that individual, even though we've never met in person, has a very high influence on my thinking, my behavior, and can influence my purchase choices. So working with influencers to provide an experience that they will share out to their followers, sometimes in the millions of followers, is a really important and effective strategy for brands and for groups. Like I mentioned, checkoff groups of dairy farmers and other species using these influencer examples. So we've been involved with several different influencer tours, but there was one that we conducted. There were actually 2 different tours in the fall of 2023 that were both focused on Gen Z. So the influences that were invited on this taste tour were Gen Z. The farms that they visited were mainly being operated, at least in part, by, we had a host on the farm who was a Gen Z representative, and just everything, the whole experience was focused for Gen Z. So we use these two different influencer tours kind of as our research model, real life experience to inform this information. In both cases, once in Iowa, once in Texas, a group of 3 to 5 online influencers had a 2-day experience where they went to some combination of farms, a processor of foods like a meat processor or another type of plant, and they had a retail or a restaurant experience. They also had opportunities to have a little cooking contest to test some recipes that they had either found or that they were creating. So just all as part of this 2-day immersion into where food comes from and how it's produced. So and then these consumer influencers shared their experience through videos, through posts on social media, through blog posts with their followers. You can also, if you wanted to dive in and understand how this whole experience happened, so there's some of the content on bestfoodfacts.org. So the next couple of slides, I kind of boil down what we've seen through all of these experiences, through the research, and more importantly, how I think the dairy community and others in farming and food production can really engage consumers. And we're going to look at it from 3 different lenses. First, the Gen Z consumers, then Gen Z farmers, and finally, Gen Z in our workplace. So first, with the consumers, those that are buying food and beverages. So focusing on our passions as farmers and food producers, and that why that drives us, and what are our goals. So if as a farmer, we can share goals around our environmental stewardship, our animal care, the development of the employees that are working on the farm, sharing those goals and just that really authentic passion resonates so well with Gen Z. As I mentioned before, they crave technology and they support technology and innovation to solve problems. So whenever we can talk about how technology is helping on farms, in the plants, throughout the food distribution system, that's really a positive. So not only is it using technology, it's also showcasing transparency when we think about opportunities like traceability or animal care that's improved through sensors and the Fitbits for cows, robotic milkers, other ways that innovation is showing up on the dairy farm. And to truly engage the Gen Z consumers, we need to offer what they crave, which is a non-tainted look into everything that happens through the farming and food supply chain. So videos, tours, these influencers tours, kind of that more direct social media access, unvarnished, untainted, authentic pictures and videos that are just coming from a really the true spot of farm production. Gen Z is also highly supportive of and expecting third-party verification of different processes across products that they consume, and that includes food and dairy. So like the farm program being the prime example for third-party verification. In dairy, we see other brands and other verification programs as well. And then one of the best pathways to get to the Gen Z consumers are through those online influencers that they're following, that they trust. And then pursuing those conversations and engaging. So when we talked back to that Gen Z tour that I mentioned, here are some comments from those that participated in the tour that was in Texas. And there was a bit of a beef production focus to that tour. But here are some of the comments that came back from those online influencers who participated. I had no idea that there was this much technology. When I envisioned a farm, it wasn't this. So it's extremely important to continue innovating, and I wish everyone had this experience. We've been told over and over to be scared of the way our food is farmed and raised, and I just don't think I believe that anymore. Because he or she had had this opportunity, this inside behind the curtain look at where their beef, meat, and other products came from. I have a much more well-rounded idea of what farming is. I have a lot more trust in the food system and in farming. I want people to see that farmers and ranchers truly do care about producing healthy, nutritious food. Grain-fed beef is equally as nutritious as grass-fed, and all cows are technically grass-fed in some way. I was really impressed with all the USDA regulated checks and balances. Back to that desire for third-party verification. So some trust in that regulatory system. Cattle eat a variety of things. They have doctors and nutritionists just like humans. And we've seen that show up for years, not only with Gen Z, but kind of making that connection in the animal care and animal medicine that has similarities to human medicine. Beef producers use so much technology to care for their animals, really viewed as a positive. So as we're trying to engage and reach Gen Z consumers, we want to tie in and really lead with our personal values as producers and farmers, and then tie into the topics that they are interested in. And I think as we look through this list, and you can read along, each of the items on this list, it's so easy for me to see how farmers are equally passionate and doing everything, all of these things as they go about the daily operations. So second audience, engaging the Gen Z farmers. So I think for those of you that might work with either have kind of a marketing, you're marketing to farmers, or maybe you work with an organization that farmers are your members, then here are some thoughts on how we engage that younger generation. And I should say that we have a robust document that goes into much more detail, and you can just scan this code here and have the ability to download this. It's about a 35-page document that really kind of describes more of the research and goes into the recommendations more than we can today. But we're thinking about that younger generation of farmers who's just coming into their own. Really asking them what they need, asking them early and often, and making them feel truly part of the decision making and the management on a farm. Said another way, I've heard many times that younger generation, when they come back from college or they move into a role on the farm, and they feel that salespeople or others continue to talk only to that older generation, the long-term historical decision maker, and Gen Z's feeling a little bit left out. So how do you incorporate them in the conversations, understand that they can influence, and sometimes they're moving into a role where they're making more decisions. And when they tell you what they need, they do expect follow-up, very promptly, because they've lived in this instant answer digital mindset all of their lives. So empower the Gen Z farmers and ranchers to really tell their stories, share how they're using innovations. So as organizations, if we can continue to develop like farmer advocate groups and really zooming in on Gen Z, as the farmer storytellers, because we need for them to meet their peers and meet their peers where they're at, and they're already all online. And then so training and supporting that advocacy is really important. And I've seen many different, especially some of the regional checkoff groups, really moving in this area and focusing on Gen Z. So enabling opportunities for that younger generation of farmers and ranchers to have growth and development. So that could be within the farm or the business that they're working in. It could also be on an industry level. So how do we get them involved in industry service opportunities or leadership opportunities, kind of customized, meeting them where they're at, but helping them see a pathway for growth and development as they really crave that. For this Gen Z generation, diversity, equality, inclusiveness is increasingly important. So making sure that they see that that's a priority for the organizations that support dairy farmers is important. And then also helping a way that we as organizations can help this younger generation of farmers is also helping the older farmers that they might be working with, or the older supply chain or consultants, to kind of better understand Gen Z and better understand how these generations can really work effectively together and have a positive yin and yang, and really kind of build on the strengths of the different generations. I'm going to take a pause here and check the chat. So Graham is saying young farmers need farming peers to talk about their experiences. And I think that's a really positive point. Finally, engaging Gen Z in the workforce. So depending on whether you're working on a farm or another area across the dairy community, as we look at this younger generation of employees coming into our work groups, how do we really work best together? So this pie chart simply shows the current workforce and that makeup. So it is still about a quarter baby boomers. This is also the generation that is looking and moving toward retirement. Then my generation, Gen X, would be about 22%. Another quarter are millennials, and then this quarter of Gen Z. So fairly evenly split right now as we're looking at kind of the population and the workforce. But some specific ways that we can engage with these younger employee and team members that are coming in is make sure that we are giving them a voice, asking for and truly listening for what's important to them, and then kind of within reason, helping to meet them with their specific needs, giving them an opportunity to really use and embrace new technologies. I'll give an example of something that we're looking at from a company perspective is how to efficiently use AI. And I don't mean artificial insemination, but how do we use the AI intelligence tools like ChatGPT and others? So there's a couple of ways we could approach this, but the more effective way is that we want to empower our Gen Z employees to kind of take this as a project and work with it and come back to leadership with some examples. So leverage that, embrace and utilize that curiosity and desire for new technologies. We really want to showcase your values. So if we look at research that tells us why Gen Z employees make different choices about where and for whom they work, it's highly important to Gen Z that they work for an organization that has similar values and similar cares about social impact as they do. So we as employers need to showcase what our values are so they can very easily see if that's a match for them. That includes our commitments around sustainability, ESG, and social impact. For Gen Z, and I would say also the millennials, we see a focus on the total person, well-being, and mental health is really important to Gen Z. And that can include boundary setting in terms of their availability, their hours, the conditions that they prefer to work in. We really want to think about our recruitment process and the tools that we're using to find these younger folks in the workforce, allowing flexibility within reason. You know, I understand the cows still need to be milked, calves fed, you know, we have schedules we need to follow, but where can we have some flexibility? You know, another example I've seen is maybe around for more, you know, office-based organizations, there's more flexibility today around topics like PTO, or choosing the holidays that you wish to celebrate that might be aligned with kind of your cultural or religious preferences. Seeking out a diverse workforce is important to Gen Z. So I just want to take kind of a pause here because I think we're hitting the Q&A time, and kind of come back on camera and invite any observations or questions from what I've shared. There were good questions and dialogue going in the chat, and I'm seeing one has just popped up now. Brittany, Amanda, have you seen any questions come through?
I haven't seen any fresh ones yet. I'm sure people are just gathering their thoughts here. But one I do have is, what have you seen that dairy is already doing to connect to Gen Z?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question, Amanda. Well, you know, I'd really like to tip, especially the some of the producer-funded organizations. So Dairy Management Inc. on the national level, there's several regional checkoff groups. So I started to see at least 3 years ago, DMI sharing how they're very proactively working to better understand and engage Gen Z. So I think with the Undeniably Dairy campaign, there started to be a very specific wave and focus on Gen Z. I've also seen DMI, they were early to embrace like gamers and YouTubers and understand who are the most influential with tremendous reach. So when we see that about half of Gen Z spends 3 hours gaming a day, you know, so who are those gamers that they follow with and connect that can improve or influence their choices? I've also seen, probably just because of where I live, I see more from Midwest Dairy, and they've been for at least the last couple of years focusing on Gen Z. We at the Center for Food Integrity, we've seen a high level of interest in these types of conversations with organizations across agriculture, you know, and including dairy. So for example, my colleague Roxy just was at the Pennsylvania Dairy Summit talking with that group there about Gen Z.
I have a question. So we've been talking about how food tastes, that flavor is such a big bottom line, that it needs to taste good. Is that still a big deal to Gen Zs? Is that kind of an overarching thing for food, or is it less important? I know you mentioned a number of things that is important to them, but I'm just curious about flavor.
Yeah, I think they're expecting flavor that also comes with the wellness and the healthful choices. So that idea of indulging. Let's take ice cream, right? So we can enjoy the flavor and the indulgence of ice cream, and we also want to know that that's contributing to the health and nutrition. So, I'll be the first to say, I can make a case that I'm going to get more calcium as I enjoy some ice cream. But, but they want kind of truly to see that those snacks, desserts, other flavors are really bringing some nutritional value as well. Another way that the importance of taste and flavor shows up is there's really an interesting paradox right now when we look at the plant-based alternative proteins. If we look at the sales trends, there are a significant number of Americans that are trying different plant-based alternatives to chicken or beef or pork products. But often if they do not make a repeat purchase, it's because it does not meet their the health and the flavor and taste expectations. So I see a couple other questions. Can you elaborate on tailoring the recruitment process for Gen Z? So I think, first of all, it's like where we promote, and then it's also kind of how we promote and show up. So Gen Z would like to see more video, right? They would like to see more from their peers. They would like to hear more of the story about the company and what is it like to be an employee of the company. So maybe more traditionally, we've led with, here's our benefit package, and here's, our this and that. And Gen Z is going to just be looking for that story around the company's mission and social impact, and then what's the experience like when you work at that company. I see Graham asking a question. It's hard to get skilled people on the farm, definitely. And as I work with pork producers, egg producers, all across, we're all in this same difficulty, how to attract young people for a job. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it does come back to like how awesome the technology is. How is data being used to be able to make better animal care decisions. And I think that we saw that in some of those comments from that beef-focused influencer tour, right? Like, I had no idea there was that much technology being used. This was not my idea of what a farm looked like at all. I did see one other question came up. Laura Lee asked, can you think of an example in successful packaging or product innovation specifically targeted at Gen Z? And Laura Lee, you have stumped me on that, but I am very curious myself. So I'll ask some other folks and kind of get back. Maybe Amanda, I think you were going to package up the recording. And that's something we can provide a follow-up answer to. Were we able to hit on all the questions that came in the chat?
I believe that is all the ones that I saw, but I will say we do have another minute. So if anybody has one last one to put in here, now is a great time.
One other thing I had thought about is kind of like, what more can we do, right? And I'd encourage us all to think about, how is dairy showing up on college campuses? So, Gen Z are all across college campuses, and I might be a little more personally zoomed into this as a mom of college students. But there are, all of a sudden, think back to our own experiences, we are exposed to new ideas, new people, So are there advocates on college campuses who can be dairy advocates with their peers? Is one thing. Let's also think about the decision makers on colleges, and professors. What are they sharing? We don't have time for this, but my daughter is studying early childhood education. One of the required classes is a semester class on sustainability. And I asked her to share with me the syllabus and the materials and the resources when they were talking about sustainability in food and animal protein production. And I was shocked and disappointed at the one-sided negativity about animal proteins that was coming through in that classroom, to the point where when she's done with the class, I do want to make some outreach to that professor. If that's in Appleton, Wisconsin, which is still a fair bit more rural, right? What's happening in college conversations around the country. And I think, and also the college food service programs and the decisions they're making in terms of what's the offering in those college dining halls. I'm also just really tickled to see how STEM is showing up more. And agriculture is part of STEM. I think like Farm Bureau has come out with Ag in the Classroom and other materials really focused on STEM, and that's real positive. So with that, Amanda, I would just thank the group for your great questions, your great interaction. I'm sure that stimulates more questions. There's no easy answer. There's no silver bullet, but the first step is asking the questions, having the conversations, you know, dreaming and thinking and strategizing about this. So thanks for your great participation. And Amanda, I'll fast forward here and turn it back to you to wrap up.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us today, and also thank you for being so interactive in the chat and unmuting and asking your questions. I do want to give a special thanks to, of course, Amy for being a great presenter on this hot topic, and also to Look East for sponsoring it. I also want to give a thank you to Zoetis again for being our web hosting and recording partner. You will get the recording of this webinar next week, along with any additional information that we want to send along to you that maybe we didn't get to today. And as you can see on the screen, there is still time to subscribe to our webinars. So not only will you get all the information for the upcoming rest of the year webinars, but you'll also get the recordings of these first 2 webinars of the year as well, included in that low price of $60. So check that out if you're interested in joining us more. And we will see you next month. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.